The bridge of the massive warship trembled as Admiral Zektor slammed his clawed fist against the metal table. His 12-foot frame towered over the other Kethvar officers, acid dripping from his razor-sharp teeth as he spoke. The smell of burning metal filled the air where his blood had touched the surface. 3,000 years, he growled, his voice like grinding stone. 3,000 years of perfect conquest. Every species we have found has knelt before us or died. Every world has become ours. The other Kethvar nodded in agreement. Their chitinous armor gleamed under the red lights of the bridge. Each one was a killing machine, bred for war and conquest. Their ancestors had clawed their way to the top of their homeworld's food chain, and they had never stopped climbing. Commander Velnash stepped forward, his own impressive frame still dwarfed by the Admiral's presence. In his clawed hands, he held a data tablet that glowed with new information. "Admiral, the scouting ships have returned from the Outer Rim," Velnash reported. "They have found another species, a new world to harvest." Zektor's eyes lit up with interest. It had been 50 years since they had found a new species to conquer. The galaxy was getting smaller, and they were running out of civilizations to destroy or enslave. "Tell me about them," the Admiral commanded. Velnash looked at the data tablet and read the report. "They call themselves humans. They live on a blue planet they call Earth. The planet sits in a small system with only one star." "How many worlds do they control?" Zektor asked. "Only their homeworld and a few small colonies. Their technology appears basic. They have just begun to explore their own solar system." The Admiral's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "How perfectly boring. What do they look like? Are they strong warriors like the Vorthak? Do they have tough skin like the Melgari?" Velnash shook his head. "No, Admiral. They are small creatures. The largest ones barely reach 6 feet tall. They have soft pink skin with no natural armor. No claws, no acid, no poison. They appear to be one of the weakest species we have ever encountered." "Weak?" Zektor leaned back in his command chair, amused. "How delightfully easy. It has been so long since we found prey that would not put up much of a fight." The other officers on the bridge began to laugh. The sound was horrible, like metal being torn apart. They had conquered species that could crush stone with their bare hands. They had defeated civilizations that could breathe in space. They had enslaved creatures that could move faster than their ships, and now they had found soft little creatures with no natural weapons at all. "What weapons do they use?" Zektor asked, still chuckling. "Simple projectile weapons that fire small metal pieces. Nothing that could penetrate our armor. They also have some explosive devices, but again, nothing that would concern us." "Do they have space warships?" "A few small vessels. Nothing larger than our scout ships. Their military appears to be designed for fighting each other, not for real war." Zektor stood up from his chair, his full height making the other officers step back. "Perfect. It has been too long since we had an easy conquest. The last 3 species gave us more trouble than expected. This will be refreshing." He walked to the large window that showed the stars beyond their ship. Out there, somewhere, was this planet Earth and its soft little humans. He could already picture their cities burning, their people running in terror as the Kethvar ships descended from the sky. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "But only a small one. We do not need our full strength for this. Take 50 ships. That should be more than enough to make these humans understand their place in the galaxy." "Should we offer them the usual terms?" Velnash asked. "Surrender and become slaves, or resist and die?" "Of course," Zektor replied. "Though I suspect they will choose surrender once they see what they are facing. Most species do when they realize how outmatched they are." Commander Velnash bowed his head. "I will lead the expedition myself, Admiral. It will be good practice for the younger warriors." "Excellent. Make sure to bring back some live specimens. The scientists will want to study them before we decide how best to use them." As Velnash left to prepare the fleet, Admiral Zektor remained at the window thinking about the conquest to come. In his long life, he had seen the Kethvar destroy hundreds of civilizations. Some had been strong, some had been clever, some had been numerous, but none had been able to stand against the might of the Kethvar Empire. These humans would be different. They would look up at the sky one day and see death coming for them in the form of Kethvar warships. They would try to fight with their little metal projectiles and their small explosives, and then they would die or kneel, just like all the others. The Admiral smiled, showing rows of acid-dripping teeth. It would be good to have an easy victory for once. His warriors needed the confidence that came from crushing weak prey. And he needed the resources that a new world would provide. He had no way of knowing that in a few short months he would face something that no Kethvar had ever encountered before. Something that would make him question everything he believed about strength, about conquest, and about what it truly meant to be an apex predator. But for now, he simply looked forward to adding another species to the long list of civilizations that had fallen before the might of the Kethvar Empire. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force ship New Horizon and stared at the screens showing the alien vessels. The ships were massive, each one 10 times larger than his own vessel. Their dark metal hulls seemed to absorb light, making them look like holes cut out of space itself. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," reported Communications Officer Betty Walsh. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see her hands shaking slightly as she worked at her console. "Put it through," Jake ordered. The screen flickered, and suddenly, Jake was looking at something from his worst nightmares. The creature on the screen was enormous, with a face that looked like it belonged on a giant insect. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth that dripped something that hissed when it hit the floor. Its eyes were black and cold, showing no emotion that Jake could recognize. "I am Commander Vel Nash of the Kethvar Empire," the creature said. Its voice was like the sound of rocks grinding together. "You will surrender your vessel immediately and prepare to be boarded." Jake looked around at his crew. They were all staring at the screen with wide eyes. Some looked terrified, others looked angry, but none of them looked ready to give up. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force," Jake replied, keeping his voice calm. "We'd like to establish peaceful contact with your people. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss mutual cooperation." The alien creature made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like breaking glass. "You misunderstand your situation, human. We do not cooperate. We conquer. You will surrender now or be destroyed." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had spent 20 years in the Earth Defense Force, and he had never backed down from a fight. He wasn't about to start now, even if these aliens were bigger and scarier than anything he had ever faced. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen," Jake said. "But I have a counter-proposal. You seem pretty confident in your abilities. How about a demonstration? Show us what you can do, and we'll show you what we can do. Then we can have a more informed discussion about our respective capabilities." Commander Velnash tilted his massive head, clearly puzzled by this response. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to Kethvar threats with a challenge. They either surrendered immediately or attacked in panic. But these humans seem strangely calm. "You wish to demonstrate your pitiful weapons against our might?" Velnash asked. "Sure," Jake replied with a slight smile. "There's a dead moon in this system. No atmosphere, no life. Perfect place for a little show and tell. Unless, of course, you're not as confident as you sound." The alien commander's eyes flashed with anger. No one had ever questioned Kethvar confidence. "Very well, human. We will show you why your species should fear us. But when you see our power, you will surrender immediately." "We'll see," Jake said. 2 hours later, both fleets met at the barren moon. The human ships looked tiny compared to the Kethvar vessels, like children's toys next to real weapons of war. But Jake wasn't worried. He had called in Lieutenant Amy Patterson and her special weapons team for this demonstration. Amy stood on the surface of the moon in her spacesuit, watching as the Kethvar transport landed nearby. The aliens that emerged were even more terrifying in person than they had been on the screen. Each one was 12 feet tall and covered in natural armor that looked harder than steel. Their claws gleamed in the sunlight, and their movements were fast and deadly. The largest Kethvar warrior stepped forward. "I am Torvak, champion of the Kethvar fleet. I will demonstrate why your kind should kneel before us." Amy nodded politely. Nice to meet you, Torvak. I'm Lieutenant Amy Patterson, Earth Defense Force Special Weapons Division. Torvak moved so fast that Amy barely saw him. One moment he was 20 feet away, the next he was standing right in front of her. His claws had carved deep grooves in the solid rock of the moon's surface as he ran. Impressive speed, Amy said calmly. Your turn to watch. She reached for the weapon strapped to her back. It was nothing fancy, just a standard 12-gauge shotgun loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Simple technology that humans had been using for over a century. The sound of the shotgun firing echoed across the airless moon through the radio communications. The HFY warriors actually stepped back. In 3,000 years of conquest, they had never heard anything quite like it. Interesting sound, Amy commented, ejecting the spent shell. We've been making weapons like this for about 200 years. Of course, we've been making weapons in general for about 10,000 years. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the human xenobiologist who had come along to observe, spoke up from her position near the human transport. 10,000 years of continuous warfare, to be more precise. Humans have been fighting each other since before we developed agriculture. We've gotten quite good at it. Torvak looked confused. You fight your own species? All the time, Lisa replied cheerfully. We've had 2 major global wars in just the last century. Millions of casualties in each one. We've developed quite an impressive variety of ways to kill each other. The HFY warriors looked at each other uncertainly. They had conquered species that were stronger, faster, and tougher than humans, but they had never encountered a species that fought constantly among themselves and somehow got stronger because of it. Amy raised her shotgun again. The thing about humans, Torvak, is that we don't fight fair. We don't have honor codes or ritual combat. When we fight to win, and we'll use whatever works. She fired 3 more rounds in rapid succession, each one hitting a different target on the moon's surface. The impact sent chunks of rock flying in all directions. This is just one weapon, Amy continued. We have thousands of different types. Guns, bombs, missiles, chemical weapons, biological weapons. We've even figured out how to split atoms and use the explosion as a weapon. Commander Vel Nash, who had been watching from his ship, finally spoke through the communication system. You destroy atoms? Oh yes, Dr. Rodriguez replied. We've only used atomic weapons in anger twice, but we've built enough of them to destroy our own planet several times over. We call it mutually assured destruction. It's kept us from having another global war for about 80 years now. The silence from the HFY side of the communication channel stretched on for several long moments. Amy smiled inside her helmet. So, gentlemen, now that we've both shown what we can do, shall we talk about that peaceful cooperation Captain Morrison mentioned? Admiral Zector paced back and forth on his ship's bridge, his claws leaving deep scratches in the metal floor. The demonstration on the moon had not gone as expected. These humans were supposed to be weak and frightened. Instead, they had been calm and confident, talking casually about weapons that could destroy entire planets. Commander Velnash, the Admiral growled, I want to know more about these humans. Order a limited attack on their outer colonies. 3 mining stations should be enough. We will see how they fight when their people are actually in danger. Velnash bowed his head. Yes, Admiral. Should we offer them the chance to surrender first? No, Zector replied. I want to see their true nature. Attack without warning, but keep it small. 3 stations, minimal force. We are studying them, not trying to destroy them yet. 2 days later, Pete Williams was having his morning coffee in the control room of Mining Station Alpha 7 when the alarm started screaming. The station shook as something large landed on the outer hull. Pete, we've got company, called out his deputy Mary Johnson from her position at the sensor console. 3 alien ships, same design as the ones that contacted Captain Morrison. They're boarding us. Pete set down his coffee and activated the station's emergency communication system. All personnel, this is Manager Williams. Protocol 7 is now in effect. I repeat, Protocol 7 is now in effect. Throughout the mining station, people immediately stopped what they were doing and began moving with practiced efficiency. Protocol 7 was something the Earth Defense Force had developed after studying every major war in human history. It was based on a simple principle: Never fight the enemy where they expect you to fight. Chief Engineer Nancy Brooks was already in the lower levels of the station, working frantically with her team. They had been preparing for this possibility ever since the first alien contact. Humans had learned long ago that the best defense against a superior enemy was to make their victory as costly as possible. "Nancy, how long do you need?" Pete asked, through his communicator. "Give me 10 minutes, Nancy replied, sweat beading on her forehead as she connected the last few wires. "Maybe 15 if you want the really nasty surprises." "You've got 20, Pete said. "Everyone else, you know the drill. Take what you can carry and get to the escape pods. Leave everything else behind." The HFY warriors who entered the A mining station expected to find terrified humans cowering in corners begging for mercy. Instead, they found empty corridors and abandoned workstations. The humans had vanished like smoke. Torvak, who was leading the boarding party, sniffed the air with his enhanced senses. He could smell that humans had been here recently, but now the station seemed completely deserted. "Cowards," one of the younger HFY warriors muttered. "They ran away rather than face us," but Torvak was not so sure. Something felt wrong about this place. His instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution, were telling him that he was walking into a trap. He was right. The first explosion came from the main corridor behind them, sealing off their escape. Trout. The second explosion took out the station's artificial gravity, sending the heavy HFY warriors floating helplessly in the air. The third explosion released a cloud of industrial chemicals that burned their enhanced senses and made it impossible for them to track anything by smell. "What is happening?" one of the warriors screamed as he crashed into a wall, unable to control his movement in zero gravity. Nancy Brooks watched from her hidden position in the ventilation system as the HFY warriors struggled with her surprises. Humans had been setting traps for their enemies for thousands of years. They had learned to use every advantage they could find, no matter how small. The next phase of Nancy's plan involved the station's mining equipment. Laser cutters designed to slice through solid rock began firing randomly throughout the station. Magnetic containment fields, normally used to hold dangerous materials, suddenly reversed their polarity and began pulling metal objects toward them, at high speed. The HFY warriors, who were used to fighting in predictable environments against enemies who followed, understood rules of combat, found themselves in a nightmare of unpredictable hazards and random dangers. Meanwhile, Captain Steve Parker was leading a small fleet of human ships toward the 3 HFY vessels that were still docked at the mining stations. His ships were tiny compared to the alien warships, barely the size of the HFY ships' weapon systems. But Steve had studied the alien ships during their demonstration at the moon. He had noticed that their weapons were designed for massive, overwhelming attacks against large targets. They were perfect for destroying cities or big warships, but they had trouble hitting small, fast-moving targets. "Remember, people," Steve said to his pilots over the communication system, "we're not trying to destroy these ships. We're trying to annoy them, hit their communication arrays, their sensor pods, their weapon targeting systems, make them blind and deaf, then disappear before they can hit back." The human ships darted around the HFY vessels like angry wasps around a bear. They fired small missiles at communication equipment, used laser cutters to slice through sensor cables, and dropped small bombs on weapon systems before racing away at full speed. The HFY ship commanders found themselves in a situation they had never faced before. Their massive weapons could not hit targets that were too small and too fast. Their sensors were being systematically destroyed by enemies they could barely detect. Their communication systems were failing, leaving them unable to coordinate their response. Commander Velnash, watching the battle from his flagship, felt something he had never experienced before: confusion. The humans were not fighting like any species the HFY had ever conquered. They did not stand and fight bravely until they were overwhelmed. They did not surrender when faced with superior force. Instead, they seemed to melt away when attacked directly, only to reappear somewhere else and cause more problems. "Sir," reported one of his officers, "we have lost contact with all 3 boarding parties. The mining stations appear to be completely evacuated, but our warriors are reporting multiple casualties from traps." "Traps?" Velnash asked. "Yes, sir. Explosive devices, chemical weapons, environmental hazards. The humans turned their own stations into weapons against us. Velnash stared at the tactical display, watching as the small human ships continued to dart around his vessels, causing damage and disappearing before his gunners could target them. These humans were not fighting like prey animals. They were fighting like predators who had learned to hunt creatures much larger than themselves. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Velnash began to wonder if the Kethvar had made a serious mistake. Admiral Zektor stood in his command center, staring at the reports from the mining station attacks. 23 Kethvar warriors injured, 6 dead, and 3 ships damaged. The humans had lost 3 empty mining stations and 0 people. This was not how conquest was supposed to work. Enough games, the Admiral snarled, his acid saliva hissing as it hit the floor. These humans think they are clever with their little tricks. We will show them what real power looks like. Prepare the full battle fleet. We attack their home world directly. Sir, Commander Velnash said carefully, perhaps we should study them more before we commit our full forces. Zektor's black eyes fixed on his subordinate with a look that had made veteran warriors tremble. Are you questioning my judgment? Commander? No, Admiral, I simply think these humans may be more dangerous than they appear. Dangerous? Zektor laughed, the sound like metal being torn apart. They are small, weak creatures who hide in holes and set traps like frightened animals. When they see our full fleet approaching their precious Earth, they will surrender or die. There is no third option. Deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, General Carlos Martinez sat in the Earth Defense Command Center, watching the displays that showed the approaching Kethvar fleet. 500 alien warships were heading toward Earth, more firepower than humanity had ever faced before. Sir, we're tracking over 500 enemy vessels, reported Intelligence Officer Robin Clark. They'll reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. Carlos nodded grimly. He had been preparing for this moment ever since the first alien contact. The Earth Defense Force had spent decades planning for the possibility of facing a technologically superior enemy. Everything they had built, every strategy they had developed was based on one simple truth. When facing a stronger opponent, you had to be smarter. Activate the Terran Doctrine, Carlos ordered. All civilian populations to the underground, shelters, all military units to their assigned positions, and someone get me a direct line to Captain Morrison. Across the planet, sirens began to wail as 8 billion people calmly made their way to the massive underground shelter systems that had been built over the past 50 years. Every major city had tunnels that could house its entire population. For months, every important factory had backup facilities hidden in remote locations. Every critical government function had multiple redundant command centers. The Kethvar fleet entered Earth's solar system expecting to find a world in panic. Instead, they found a planet that seemed to be calmly preparing for war. Commander Helen Foster stood on the bridge of Orbital Defense Platform 7, one of hundreds of armed stations that surrounded Earth like a deadly shell. Each platform was small and well hidden, designed to be overlooked by enemies who were looking for large, obvious targets. Helen, this is Carlos, came the voice of the general through the communication system. The big boys are almost here. Are you ready? Born ready, General, Helen replied, checking her weapon systems one final time. We've got full loads on all missile tubes and laser batteries are charged to maximum. The Kethvar fleet moved into Earth orbit with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Admiral Zektor stood on his command bridge looking down at the blue and white planet below. Begin the bombardment, he ordered. Target their major cities first. Once they see their homes burning, they will beg for mercy. The first wave of Kethvar plasma cannons fired toward Earth's surface. The massive energy beams should have vaporized entire city blocks. Instead, they struck powerful energy shields that surrounded every major population center. The shields held, absorbing the alien attacks and dispersing the energy harmlessly into space. What? Zektor stared in disbelief. How do they have planetary defense shields? Sir, one of his officers reported, we're detecting massive energy, readings from the planet's surface. They have defense systems we did not know about. That was when Helen Foster and her fellow commanders struck back. Hundreds of hidden orbital defense platforms suddenly activated, revealing themselves as they launched thousands of missiles toward the Kethvar fleet. The missiles were small and fast, designed to overwhelm point defense systems through sheer numbers. The Kethvar ships, built for overwhelming frontal assaults, found themselves under attack from every direction at once. Their massive weapons were too slow to track the small, fast human missiles. Their shields, designed to stop other capital ships, were not optimized for dealing with swarms of smaller projectiles. "Sir, we're taking damage across the fleet," reported Commander Velnash. "These humans, they fight like nothing we have ever seen." But the real shock came when Dr. Lisa Rodriguez's voice suddenly filled every communication channel in the Kethvar fleet. Somehow, the humans had hacked into their communication systems. "Attention Kethvar fleet," Lisa said, her voice calm and professional. "This is Dr. Lisa Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. I have a message for your commanders." Admiral Zektor tried to cut off the transmission, but his communication officers could not stop it. The humans had somehow taken control of their own systems. "You have made a fundamental error in your assessment of our species," Lisa continued. "You see us as weak because we lack natural weapons and armor, but you fail to understand what that weakness has taught us." The battle continued to rage around Earth's orbit as Lisa spoke. Human fighters, tiny compared to the Kethvar warships, darted between the alien vessels like schools of fish, striking at vulnerable points and disappearing before the enemy could respond. "We have no claws, so we built tools. We have no armor, so we built shields. We have no poison, so we built weapons. We have no natural advantages, so we learned to create them." Private Tony Clark, trapped in a damaged defense station, was working frantically to repair his communication equipment when he noticed something interesting. A piece of Kethvar technology had been blasted loose from an enemy ship and was floating nearby. The young soldier, who had grown up taking apart computers and rebuilding them for fun, saw an opportunity. But most importantly, Lisa's voice continued, "We learned something that you never had to learn. We learned to survive when everything was against us. We learned to adapt when our environment changed. We learned to fight when we had no choice." Tony managed to capture the alien device and drag it into his station. Using nothing but basic tools and his knowledge of electronics, he began to take it apart. Within an hour, he had figured out how the Kethvar fighters worked and had jury-rigged a way to control one of them. "You are apex predators because you were born that way," Lisa said. "We became apex predators because we had to. And that, Admiral Zektor, makes all the difference." The stolen Kethvar fighter, now under Tony's control, suddenly turned on its own fleet and began attacking other alien ships. The confusion this caused spread throughout the Kethvar formation as they tried to figure out what was happening. Admiral Zektor watched his perfect battle plan fall apart around him. His superior technology was being turned against him. His overwhelming numbers were being outmaneuvered by smaller, smarter opponents. His 3,000-year streak of easy victories was ending in the most humiliating way possible. "Sir," Commander Velnash said quietly, "perhaps we should consider a strategic withdrawal." For the first time in his long life, Admiral Zektor was hearing words he had never expected to hear from one of his own officers. The Kethvar were being asked to retreat, not by their enemies but by their own commanders. As he looked down at the blue planet below, still spinning peacefully, despite the battle raging in its orbit, Zektor began to realize that he had made the biggest mistake in Kethvar history. He had awakened something that should have been left alone. The Kethvar fleet retreated from Earth's orbit in disorder, something that had never happened in 3,000 years of conquest. Admiral Zektor sat in his command chair, staring at the damage reports. 37 ships destroyed, over 100 damaged, and thousands of warriors dead or injured, all because of a species they had dismissed as weak and helpless. But Admiral Zektor had made one crucial mistake. He thought the humans would be satisfied with driving off his fleet. He thought they would celebrate their victory and go back to their normal lives. He had no idea that humans were capable of holding grudges. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Earth's Vengeance, looking at the captured Kethvar technology that filled the cargo holds. Human engineers had been working around the clock for 3 months, taking apart alien devices and figuring out how they worked. What they had discovered was both exciting and terrifying. "Dr. Rodriguez, what's the final report on the alien technology?" Jake asked. Lisa looked up from her data tablet, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. "It's fascinating, Captain. Their technology is actually quite advanced, but it's also very specialized. They've focused entirely on building bigger and more powerful weapons. They never had to learn to be efficient or creative. And our improvements? We've made their technology about 30% more effective by applying human engineering principles, better power systems, improved targeting computers, more efficient weapon designs. It turns out that when you've spent thousands of years trying to build better mousetraps, you get pretty good at improving other people's designs too." Jake nodded grimly. The human fleet that was now assembled in Earth's outer system was unlike anything that had ever existed. Human ships equipped with improved Kethvar weapons, human tactics applied to alien technology, and human determination driving it all forward. "Communications, get me Lieutenant Colonel Sam Butler," Jake ordered. Sam Butler appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the bridge of the assault ship, Payback. He was a thin man with cold eyes who had spent his entire military career studying how to fight enemies who were bigger and stronger than he was. "Sam, are your teams ready?" Jake asked. "More than ready, Captain. We've spent the last 3 months studying everything we could learn about Kethvar psychology and tactics. I think we've figured out how to beat them at their own game." "Explain." Sam smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "The Kethvar have spent 3,000 years as apex predators. They've never had to adapt, never had to change, never had to learn from defeat. They're like a boxer who's never been hit in the face. They have no idea how to handle it when someone fights back effectively." Dr. Rodriguez joined the conversation from her position at the science station. "I've been studying their biology and psychology. They're actually quite fragile mentally. Their entire culture is based on the idea that they're the strongest, fastest, and most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. When that belief is challenged, they don't know how to respond." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the human fleet. 50 ships, tiny compared to the Kethvar armada that had attacked Earth, but each one was crewed by humans who had grown up learning that size and strength weren't everything. "All right, people. Let's go show these aliens what happens when you threaten Earth." The human fleet moved toward the Kethvar home system using a route that took them through several smaller Kethvar colonies. But instead of attacking these worlds directly, the humans did something that confused and terrified the aliens. They sent messages. The first message was simple. It was broadcast to every Kethvar world in their own language. "This is the Earth Defense Force. We are coming to discuss the terms of your surrender." Admiral Zektor, who had returned to the Kethvar homeworld in disgrace, read the message with disbelief. "Surrender? They want us to surrender? These tiny creatures think they can make the Kethvar Empire surrender?" But as reports came in from the outlying colonies, Zektor began to realize that the humans were doing something far more dangerous than attacking. They were undermining everything the Kethvar believed about themselves. Lieutenant Colonel Butler's psychological warfare teams had studied every aspect of Kethvar culture. They knew that the aliens' entire society was based on fear and dominance. So the humans began systematically destroying that foundation. They broadcast recordings of the battle at Earth, showing Kethvar ships being destroyed by tiny human fighters. They sent detailed analyses of Kethvar military tactics, pointing out every weakness and flaw. They even included helpful suggestions for how the Kethvar could improve their technology and strategies. But the most devastating message was the simplest one. It was delivered by Dr. Rodriguez, speaking directly to the Kethvar people in their own language. "Citizens of the Kethvar Empire," she said, her voice calm and professional. "We are humans from the planet Earth. Your leaders attacked our world because they believed we were weak. They were wrong. We are not weak. We are something far more dangerous. We are patient." The message continued to play on every Kethvar communication channel, despite their attempts to block it. "For 3,000 years, you have conquered other species because you were stronger than they were. But strength is not the only way to survive. Intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation can be more powerful than claws and armor. We are here to prove that to you. When the human fleet finally arrived at the Kethvar homeworld, they did not attack immediately. Instead, they took up positions around the planet and waited. The waiting was almost worse than an attack would have been. Admiral Zektor assembled the largest fleet in Kethvar history to defend their homeworld. Over 2,000 warships surrounded the planet, ready to die rather than surrender, but the humans still did not attack. Instead, Captain Morrison sent a single message to the Kethvar fleet. We challenge Admiral Zektor to single combat. 1 human ship against 1 Kethvar ship. Winner takes all. The challenge was absurd. 1 small human ship against the pride of the Kethvar fleet? But Zektor found himself unable to refuse. His entire culture was built on the idea of personal combat and individual strength. To refuse would be to admit weakness. The battle was brief and decisive. The human ship, piloted by Captain Morrison himself and equipped with improved Kethvar technology, outmaneuvered and outfought the Admiral's flagship. When Zektor's ship was disabled and helpless, Morrison did something that no Kethvar had ever done in the history of their species. He offered mercy. Admiral, Morrison said over the communication channel, you fought bravely. Your ship is disabled, but your crew is alive. I could destroy you now, but I won't. Instead, I'm going to offer you something your species has never offered to anyone else. A choice. What choice? Zektor asked, his voice filled with confusion and shame. You can continue to be apex predators, Morrison replied. But you can't be the only apex predators anymore. The galaxy is big enough for more than 1 dangerous species. You can share it with us, or you can spend the rest of your existence trying to fight us. But if you choose to fight, you should know that we've learned everything there is to know about fighting from 10,000 years of practice. Admiral Zektor looked around at his disabled ship, his defeated fleet, and his confused warriors. For the first time in Kethvar history, they had been offered terms by someone who had defeated them. What are your terms? He asked quietly. Simple, Morrison replied. Stop conquering other species. Stop enslaving civilizations. Start acting like the intelligent creatures you obviously are instead of like mindless predators. Do that, and we can coexist peacefully. Refuse and we'll keep having conversations like this one until you change your mind. As Admiral Zektor considered the human offer, he realized that everything had changed. The Kethvar were no longer the only apex predators in the galaxy. They had encountered something that was more dangerous than strength, more deadly than natural weapons, and more terrifying than any monster that had ever lived. They had encountered humans who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The age of the Kethvar Empire was over. The age of shared power had begun.